are back. You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and joining me again, it's Kevin Durso. How are you, buddy?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing okay. We kind of getting into the stretch of the season. Not the stretch of the season. We're getting into the length of the season at this point, right? Like we're past that first 10, 15 games. We're kind of settling into the dog days, as it were. And
not as mushy middle as because the mushy middle is obviously the standings.
Of course, yes. And that is mushy, and we may touch on that as the show goes on here.
Sure, of course.
Where we sit here and, teams are hitting the 20-game mark. We're about a quarter of the way through the season. The Flyers are still kind of hanging around. We got a couple games to talk about from this week. Before we dive into that, make sure to follow the show on social media. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the like button over there. Leave reviews wherever you're at. We're at YWT Podcast pretty much everywhere we can be. All right, getting right into it. Where do you want to go here? Do you want to start at the beginning of the week, or do you want to start
wherever you would like?
Okay. Let's roll through the beginning of the week real quick, and then we'll end on a high note.
I guess the injuries really first then. If you want to go beginning of the week.
Yeah, and we do start with a pretty bad, some pretty bad news for a team.
Unfortunate,
that is rolling along pretty well and has some really good energy. And that is the fact that Noah Cates will be out approximately 6 to 8 weeks, hopefully, with some injuries. Where are we at on that? What's going on with Noah Cates? Is this something that we have to be worried about long term?
No.
Okay.
It's not, because
good news.
No, originally when stuff like this comes out, because you get the typical, it's 6 to 8 weeks, lower body, and all John Tortorella would say in the early part of the week was it'll be a while, because the news wasn't even out yet. He's doing, I guess this was the Monday practice press conference before the Tuesday game or whatever. And then on Tuesday, he straight up volunteered the information of exactly what the injury is, which is rare. We don't usually get the specifics, right?
Right.
Noah Cates broke his foot.
Yep.
Second period or something like that. Something like second period of the Islander game that was the previous Saturday. Basically, and I'm sure you've heard this a million times in terms of what happens when it comes to hockey players. If you have something like that happen, probably blocking a shot, right?
Yep.
It happens. You might be able to play through the rest of the game because the swelling does not pick up until you take the skate off.
The boot off.
Yep. Yes. And once that happened, the thing flared up. They got it checked out, and then he wasn't available.
And that's where this all started.
Yep. But but to get specifics, to actually get that he broke his foot. Cool. Yeah. We now know the answer. We know exactly what he's recovering from. You won't see him on the ice for a little bit because, it's that kind of lower body injury. He's not just going to go out and start skating tomorrow or something.
Turns out it's hockey is a sport you need your feet for.
Yeah, for sure.
But the good news is, like you said, it sounds like it's just broken bones. It's not any sort of long-term structural damage.
That's just let it heal up, and the next step will be whenever he's ready to get back on the ice to start preparing for that, he will. But
he's a young kid. You expect him to bounce back. He'll probably get a couple of games in Lehigh Valley to get the engine going again.
Well, and it was interesting because on that particular game, that Saturday game where this all happens, he started playing the wing that day, or that evening, I guess, is really the way you want to look at it or whatever. And probably created more offensively in that game than he had in a long time, just in terms of opportunities. Obviously, that was the game that nobody scored in until the shootout. But he created a little bit more, and it created some different looks for him than playing center and having to defend. So, there was maybe something to unlock with that potentially, like beyond that game, if you were able to continue it and see where it goes. Now, obviously, he just goes on the shelf for this length of time. And that's, 6 to 8 weeks, you're looking at the entire month of December at that point. You're talking mid to late January, really.
Right, at the earliest.
Right. So, I guess what that would mean is worst, and think about this. This really is worst case scenario, by the way, because the worst case scenario would be that he's not ready to come back, because upwards of 8 weeks would be that Boston game on that Saturday afternoon, which I think is their last one before the All-Star break.
Okay.
So then he would get another week off just because they don't have anything on the schedule.
Sure. And again, we imagine,
which isn't a problem.
Right. Again, we imagine that the Flyers, we do still hold out that they are probably going to be falling out of playoff races and stuff like that, especially when you're losing guys like Noah Cates.
Well, right. I was gonna say that's a contributing factor if you're taking him out of play for 2 months. I mean, to their credit, and we'll kind of shift this to the results of the week and things like that.
Sure.
To their credit, it hasn't done anything necessarily this week.
No, and we'll get into that. But
I mean, were they missing a player like Noah Cates in the game against Carolina? Possibly, because it became a little bit more of a run and gun speed round, you know? And when you're playing a game like that, that is going to be problematic when you don't have guys who can defend down the middle. It really showed how thin they were. Like, that game really showed how thin they were at the center ice position when you take out Noah Cates.
Absolutely.
And they kind of were getting into it again against New Jersey, too, if we want to be honest. I mean, that game was 3-1 early third period, and it looks like it's going to be another, and it looks like it's going to be another regulation loss.
Yep.
They bounce back from that, obviously. They rally back. They get it to overtime. They don't win the game, but it didn't matter. You know, it was what it was. And, you know, so you give them credit for the bounce back effort. And there's a guy I want to talk about through the course of that game. And we'll be talking about him with the Saturday game as well. Because he had heavy involvement in all of that stuff. And then you get to Saturday where they actually this time do fall behind technically. I mean, it was the second period when a goal was even scored. That was very much looking like the game from against the Islanders the week before. You played half the game.
It sure was. It was starting to look like things were going to get locked down there. That Tuesday game against Carolina really was definitely their poorest effort of the week. You saw the comeback against the Devils, and then we'll get into the game against Pittsburgh.
Well, let me say this about the game against Carolina, because I want to make very clear this was a terrible game to watch.
Oh yeah,
like this game was brutal in terms of the execution from both sides. I mean, let's be real about this. This was a 2-1 game until there was like 4 minutes left in the game, and then Carolina scores a weak goal. You know, there's no other way to classify it. I understand the shots probably or whatever it was going wide, and then it got stuck underneath the Carter Hart skate and it goes into the net.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. It's weak. And that ended any possibility whatsoever of them finding a way to tie the game.
I believe I texted you when that goal went in.
Yeah, did you just text me oof or something like that? I feel like that's what it was.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, that is what you said. But
and you responded with "can't happen," and you're correct. And it's one of those things that when your team is still in the game, right? It's a 2-1 game. You're in the third period, and no, you don't deserve to be winning. But here you are. You're 1 goal down with 5 or 6 minutes to go.
But there was,
you need a save there.
But and the problem was also there was so much wrong with the game. Like Carolina's first goal, to their credit, typical goal. It's a rebound goal. Michael Bunting's there in the slot area. Puts it home.
They're good at that. Yep.
You tie the game up on a goal that's very much stylistically your own. It's saved by Carter Hart. The rebound comes all the way out to where Tyson Forrester is. He gets it right down the other end of the ice. There's Travis Konechny, kind of cherry picking a little bit, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's kind of what the Flyers do,
right? That's the style you're going for.
Yep.
So he goes in, he scores on a breakaway. Okay. Now you got to tie a game. You give up the lead because you go to try to clear the puck and it hits off of a shin pad and goes back in, and the guy is able to put it in. It's Brendan Lemieux, who wasn't even supposed to play.
Right.
That was a last minute addition because all of a sudden warm-ups happened and Andrei Svechnikov was sick, couldn't play.
Yeah, so, that one hurt me in fantasy, but that's okay.
Sure. Now on the other side of things, when the goal in the third period that we're talking about, Seth Jarvis was probably the closest guy on that team who deserved a goal that night. He was all over the place.
Sure.
Had a lot of scoring chances. He is a really good player.
Man, he's underrated. Underrated.
Compared to some of the other guys on the roster, I'll give you that, because he should fall into the category with the Ahos and Svechnikovs and guys like that. And he
should be talked about in some league awards, and he's not. Like, I could see him in the Selke conversation at some
potentially.
point in his career.
Well, I get where you're coming from with that. And then they barely get a chance to pull the goalie, and the game was over. You know, like the empty net goal game was over. And again, it was like you knew what the result was going to be the second that the third goal goes in. Like, sure, there's a possibility that anything could happen.
Well, I was going to say, you say that, You say that, and then the game against New Jersey.
Well, no,
happens.
different
Right.
because this was with a little bit of less time, and because of the fact that it felt like it was everything else was so demoralizing, they really couldn't get many quality chances. Like, it's one thing when you're pushing and you can see the push at the end and you're down by a couple goals and maybe you're gonna find a way. This was different. Carolina played the game that I thought they were going to play from the defensive side anyway.
Yeah, there was a chance you could have won that game. Right. There was a chance you could have won that game. Carter Hart makes a save there, even if he scrambles for a little bit. You're still very much in it, of course, but
sure.
Like I said, you definitely did not deserve to win that one in the slightest. But
right. So we want to get to this.
Speaking of games the Flyers didn't deserve to win.
This whole game was interesting, by the way.
Yeah.
The whole thing. Because I suppose we start with the first period, where, by the way, the first note that I'm going to pull from this game has to do with the first Devils goal, and it has nothing to do necessarily with. And I know there's a storyline that comes from the Devils' first goal that I will get into, but that's not where I'm going with this.
Yeah,
I just made a quick note after it gets scored, which, by the way, was 3 minutes 10 seconds into the game. I make a quick note right away on social.
Joel Farabee was terrible.
No, I didn't even say that.
Okay.
Because I didn't. This has nothing to do with breaking down the goal itself. This just had to do with. So since the winning streak, you've given up the first goal, with the exception of the Islander game where there was no first goal to give up unless it would have been in the shootout.
Right.
You've given up the first goal a minute 49 in against the Islanders, 45 seconds against the Rangers, something like, I think the Carolina game was like 5 minutes and 30 seconds, something in that range. It was less than 6 minutes in.
Yeah, you're struggling to weather the early
and then this was 3:10, and I'm going. So already we can already bring up the stat about how they haven't won a game yet when giving up the first goal.
Carolina was 5:39.
There you go.
Yeah.
So I was close enough. I said 5.5. There you go.
Absolutely.
But
yeah, you're having a hard time weathering the early.
And this one's 3:10. So forget about the part where it's just you haven't won when you give up the first goal. It's look at the times you're giving up the first goal. I mean, you're putting yourself behind the 8 ball on that number.
You're up against it. You're up against it by your third or fourth shift.
And that's not even fair to say completely. Like, okay, the Ranger game was what it was. The Islander game, a little more interesting because you were kind of back in that game and it was a 1-goal game. So it wasn't like it was out of reach or anything like that. And in the Carolina game, you tied it up. So technically you're back, so to speak. And that just, so that just right away kind of puts a stamp on where it felt like that game was headed. And then to top it all off, they score again to make it 2-0 before the period's over. And again, what do you think's going to happen when you got Jack Hughes just coming down on a 2-on-1? That's a trend for later that we'll discuss, obviously. But Jack Hughes, that was, by the way, like sometimes you have a layup when like when I do the previews and I pick a player to watch, sometimes you have a layup. That was a layup. I had 2 games in a row where it was kind of a layup on who to go with, and it paid off both times because Jack Hughes had another 3 points in the game. That shot is perfect. The shot that he takes there is perfect.
He's also good at hockey.
He's really good. Yeah, there's no denying that.
He's going to be a problem in this division for a long time.
Sure, of course. Well, because of the fact that you've got 2 first overall picks on the roster.
Oh yeah,
and the guy who they took first out of those 2 first overalls is not the best one.
Correct. And
that's not to take away from his value at all, because he's a very valuable player. Nico Hischier is.
If the New Jersey Devils can get a singular solitary save, they're going to be a fantastic team.
I mean, do you want them to have Marty Brodeur again? I guess is what you're saying.
No, but that's all they're missing is what I'm saying. That is a roster that is built to do some damage.
Well, considering the fact that in this particular game, it's going to be longer now because Dougie Hamilton, I think they said, is out indefinitely is what it is. But at the time, it was relatively new. There wasn't really a whole giant update on how long he was going to be out, but they didn't have him. They didn't have Timo Meier. The list of injuries that they had in this game was a laundry list. Because there's another one. I'm pulling up the roster sheet right now because there was another one who was Eric Halla was out. And that's not a superstar, but that's a good depth player to have. That's a third line center for you or something. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And that is the sort of thing where when you're playing it against a team like the Flyers, you expect your third line center to kind of provide some depth, provide some scoring.
Sure. And at the same time, though, you have Tyler Toffoli, who looks really good, and Jesper Bratt didn't even do anything in this game in particular, but still looks dangerous. The first goal of the game is by another one of their young players who's going to probably have a really solid career. I really like Alexander Holtz. I did when they drafted him. I'm not surprised by seeing him start to put up some goals. Dawson Mercer had an assist later in the game. He's another younger player who I think is going to help them take steps. They obviously have guys like Andre Palat, who they signed to kind of take that step. Meyer kind of comes into play with that too. Obviously, he didn't play, but you get the point. And
the Flyers have some young players of their own.
Sure. So, before we jump into the comeback,
okay,
because we're still on the first period, we got to talk about the end of the first period.
Okay,
because we can't talk about this game and not talk about the first period and the end of the first period.
So you want to talk about Garnet Hathaway?
Yes, because because it wasn't a penalty. They're right. It wasn't a penalty. And the reason it wasn't a penalty is not because, like, I understand where the problem lies. And the simple fact of the matter is you put a rule in place to prevent this very thing from happening. And then you didn't follow your own rule.
Right. The correct answer is the linesman should be blowing the whistle far earlier than he is.
Let's put it this way too, okay? Because I don't know. Anything anymore is what it is or whatever. And this is part of where, because we're going to get into this later on in the show too, because we have to get further along the schedule to get to some of the quotables of the week from John Tortorella. But he had a different quotable when it came to this whole situation. Not immediately after the game, because
he was mad, by the way. If you watch the clip, I have never seen a coach two-hand palm down smack the bench like that. Like smack the top of the boards. He was angry.
And this is what I wanted to say about, like, kind of pulling back on this for a second, because the Devils broadcast was calling for a penalty on it too. Now, hang on, and I get that. I think it speaks volumes when you have the superstar of the team, who's not only just the superstar of the team. It's his brother who got hit.
Sure.
So Jack Hughes is on the bench, and I'm going to tell you right now, he's not talking to Hathaway.
Right, he's talking to the referee.
He's talking to the linesman, going,
Absolutely.
"Do your job."
Absolutely.
So there you go. It had nothing, and he's not talking to the referee in terms of do your job, like call a penalty. It's the linesman. Do your job and blow the whistle, because Luke Hughes thinks that's icing.
Right.
He pulls up. He thinks it's icing. Now, that is a mistake on Hughes's part, because if you don't hear a whistle, you better keep playing and you better brace yourself for a hit. It's a contact sport.
4 words that get drilled into you from day one of Pee Wee hockey.
Well, that should anyway, but go ahead.
Play to the whistle. Now, Kevin, when did the whistle blow during this sequence?
About
simultaneous with contact.
About the moment that Garnet Hathaway's hands were pushing Luke Hughes.
Right. Now,
to finish the check.
Did Garnet Hathaway lunge in an upward direction?
Not leaving his feet. Okay. No.
Did he extend his elbow or otherwise?
Not from what I could see. And listen, if you wanted to give him even 2 on that, I can kind of understand it a little bit. I don't think it was a penalty, but
did he make significant deliberate contact with the head of Luke Hughes?
No.
Okay.
Not from what I saw in that clip.
So what we have here is a roughly shoulder to shoulder body check, chest, shoulder.
Right. I mean, he pushes off of them
below the head.
Right.
Contact between 2 players while the puck is in play. There was no charging. There was no elbowing. There was no contact with the head. Why?
Right. And see,
because he hit him hard.
Well, no. I'll tell you the biggest part of the equation that came into play, and again, it's the linesman's fault for this, because the biggest part of the actual rule, they called boarding. Let's just start with that. They called boarding, which part of the rule book for a boarding call talks about a defenseless player.
Right.
But that's at your own fault. He's defenseless because he stopped playing because he thinks you're going to blow the whistle.
Right.
So again, you either and to be fair, that's why I put a little bit of blame on Hughes, because if you're supposed to play through to the whistle,
he certainly did not. In that
it's not that he did not. It's that whistle is supposed to be coming.
That's fair.
At the hash mark.
Well, right. This judgment's supposed to be called at the hashes.
Right. You got to the goal line and you didn't hear anything. Now, where I will blame the officials again for this is you have 2 options. You either call it icing at the hash marks like you're supposed to,
or you wave it off.
It's not just that you wave it off. When they wave it off, there's usually a verbal cue. No, something like, you'll hear somebody, right? You hear somebody, no, right? Or something like that. So they indicate that it's not, so
Right.
that you don't stop playing because they've already waved it off. So that
Neither
was why
one
it was, and
happened in
neither
this
one happened. There was
circumstance.
no there was no verbal cue whatsoever to stop
You
playing.
left these players twisting in the wind.
Right.
Garnet Hathaway, being a physical player who is thinking body contact pretty much at all times
Sure.
when it's legal, thought body contact, went body contact, did not hear a whistle.
Well, can we also just pull up the fact that also Luke Hughes is listed at 6'2", 184, but he looks like he's about 107, like 160 pounds soaking wet. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like he looks like he's not even close to that. And he got, because he didn't have any momentum going at all, because he's going to stop playing, assuming an icing call. He gets thrown over like a paper bag, like because of that. And that's all I'm saying. Like, you just got to think about those things. And the officials really need to be like, to be honest, the officials did it as like, turned it into a situation where two wrongs don't make a right. The player didn't play to the whistle, but assumed a whistle was being blown because the rule is like that. You didn't blow the whistle. And because of all of it, and not to mention the fact that the immediate result of the play was Hughes is hurt. Even though that wasn't the long-term result, the immediate was Hughes is hurt and he went straight to the locker room. Well, then I guess there must be a penalty, and they called it based on that too. And they tried to wrong another wrong and got the whole thing wrong.
Yep.
Because of it. And that's what John Tortorella was mad about. Was that they tried basically that there was it shouldn't have been. They're killing off and that's why I'm saying killing off a 5-minute penalty that could have broken the game open before it even got to the end of the first period. Credit to the Flyers for killing off. Well, not only that, but here's part of the equation we forgot to mention over the course of the entire first part of this game, that the Devils have the top ranked power play in the league that came in at something like 36.8%, and they didn't score on a 5-minute power play.
Yep.
That's a game changer.
The Flyers penalty kill honestly has been, I don't know if they've been an elite unit in the NHL, but they've certainly been their fair share of dangerous.
Well, the thing, and we'll definitely get into this when we get to the Saturday game, because there's another equation to penalty killing that has been kind of prominent this year.
Right.
But one of the things I will say is that specifically over the last handful of games too, I mean, they gave up a power play goal to the Devils later, in the third period. That also, by the way, seemed to put it out of reach. And then just when you think they're on the mat and dead, here they come again.
They sit up like the Undertaker.
Now, I do want. This is where I think it's the proper time to bring a specific player into the equation, because we're going to talk about him with this third period after the Devils had scored to get to make it a 3-1 game, make it feel like it was probably out of reach.
Yeah,
and that the Flyers scored twice, and the first goal for. I'm not even kidding when I tell you this, for almost 24 hours was Sean Walker's goal.
Huh.
Because that's who they gave it to during the game. That's what it said afterwards. And then John Tortorella said something on Friday, the practice following the Devils game, which was Thursday. So Friday's practice, said something that maybe gave a little bit of like was kind of like a teaser for like, hey, there's something going to happen in a few hours. Just bear with me. Because the game tying goal with under a minute to go in the game was about 50 seconds left. Scott Lawton takes the shot from the point, it deflects, and Tyson Forster, who finally gets another goal.
Yep. He needed it.
Celebrated like it was his first.
Yep.
And part of that, by the way, I'm not making it seem like, he's on like, the guy who scored 3 last year and had technically 2 by that point, because that's the whole twist of the thing was Forster deflected Sean Walker's shot and nobody knew it for a day. Or if it looked like it, they didn't officially give it to him for a day.
Right.
Because Tortorella said on Friday that Forster got 2 goals without actually taking a shot. Because he deflected both of them. So good for him for doing it. But I think it was the magnitude of the situation. You're down, you're trying to fight back. You just scored 1 to get it to a 1-goal game with 5 minutes to go. And it's under a minute to go, and and it's power play too. And you finally get yours. Like, you get the moment where you tie the game up. It's the last minute.
Huge.
Forster had to jump like a foot off the ice.
He definitely did.
Looking like Bobby Clark, in some of the old pictures, right? Like he jumped, he got some airtime.
He leapt.
Yeah, he was very, very jubilant about this one. And good for him for being in the right place at the right time to deflect that shot to get the goal.
Yep.
And it looks like it's going to set up kind of a crazy overtime situation, and the overtime lasted all of 28 seconds because they gave up a 2-on-1, and the 2-on-1 was with the Hughes brothers, because Luke Hughes, by the way, came back at the start of the second period.
And by the way, real quick, can we talk about the penalty that resulted in that power play that Tyson Forster scored on to tie the game there?
Oh, sure, the Brendan Smith slashing. Yes, the Brendan Smith slashing call that. That earned him a 2-game suspension.
Sure. Brendan Smith and Travis Konechny got in a little bit of an altercation.
For what it's worth, by the way, because Konechny he came away scot-free on the ice in that moment. He got fined the next day because it wasn't exactly like it was a little cross-check.
No, he whacked him pretty good.
Yeah, he started it, and then the response was a two-handed slash that was dangerous.
If you're only going to give Brendan Smith 2 minutes, which, by the way, should have been 5, right? And especially, right, if we're talking Garnet Hathaway, especially after the rest have had time to go in the room and see that hit and see that was a clean hit and that maybe they called that a little bit wrong. How do we look at this situation where a player turns and full-blown tomahawks?
2 hands. Yep, 2-hander.
Full-blown 2-hand. Like, that is... Okay. Couple times throughout this show.
Yeah.
The Philadelphia Flyers have been faced with severe instances of intent to injure by their opponent. The most notable that I can think of off the top of my head. Any guesses? In recent years?
Of deliberate intent to injure?
The one that jumped immediately to my brain, and it leads us into our other opponents here, is Evgeny Malkin and the stick swing against Michael Raffl.
Okay, I kind of know where you're going. See,
I just mean in terms of intent to injure.
Sure. Well, when you said involving the other team that we're going to talk about in a moment too, I immediately went back to 2012, and there was the late moment. There was the which game I'm already going to, because Danny Briere took Game a hit 6. That was well. You had that one, and then you also had in the playoffs where right. But then you had in the playoffs where I think. Was that still Matt Cook at the time who took a run at both Couturier and Giroux? And Giroux got up and was staggered, and so was Couturier for a little bit, and it was on the same player. Malkin did it to Couturier, and then Cook did it to
Matt
Giroux.
Cook.
Yep. Yeah, I know. Before we get off of this game and go to the Pittsburgh game, because we teased the other part of it, and you said who it was.
Well, but what I'm saying,
we got to talk about the Joel Farabee aspect of this game too.
Sure, but one more thing.
One more thing on Brendan Smith. Yeah, go ahead.
If that is a 5-minute penalty, the Flyers have the power play into overtime, and it was mentioned on the broadcast. And Brian Boucher threw it out there as kind of an offhanded comment, and then it turned out to be significantly relevant. Right, the Flyers score, the Flyers tie the game. It's going to overtime. You should be on a man advantage for the first 2 or 3 minutes.
Right, potentially. Yeah, I get it.
And in overtime, that feels pretty automatic for a lot of teams. I know we talked about the Flyers power play struggle, so it's certainly not a guarantee with this team. But the 4-on-3, there's just so much open ice that having that space is a pretty big deal.
I can think of a way the power play would be better,
if you put Joel Farabee on it.
Well, yeah, that's one way, but I can think of a way the power play can be better in the future, let's just say, based on something that we saw on Saturday. But before we get out on the Saturday, the Joel Farabee story.
Yes.
Because again, we mentioned the Devils goal that was 3:10 into the game. That was the last time Joel Farabee saw the ice that night.
56 seconds of ice time.
Now, I have no problem with John Tortorella being this type of coach and wanting to send a message to a player.
Sure.
If somebody, because his answer after the game, by the way, was, "You want to know why I benched him? He didn't listen."
Right.
It's vague, sure, but he's not going to disclose that information.
Right. He doesn't need to air dirty laundry like that.
And when pushed for a follow-up, immediately even said, "I'm not going to go there. So ask anything else, but not this. You want to talk about the hockey game? Let's talk about the hockey game. I'm not answering it." Right. And he doesn't have to, and all that stuff. I get all that. Here's my complaint about this situation. The second that you lose Garnet Hathaway for the game, you got to throw your ego out the window.
Right.
And
you
sending a
give the
message is
kid-
no longer important, especially if you're the coach whose message all year has been, I'm trying to win. Right.
Absolutely. Right.
Like we can talk about the big picture of the rebuild and whether or not that's going the right direction and all this type of stuff. And the people out there who are going to sit there and tell you they're winning too many games, all stuff like that. The coach has flat out told you, I'm trying to win. Right.
Sure.
And as far as I'm concerned, I don't think he did the most. He did the most practical thing to try to help your team win, if that's his individual goal, by deliberately turning a situation where you were automatically down 1 forward and forcing yourself to be down 2 because he didn't listen.
Well, and even that happened late enough in the first period that even if you want to give him the rest of the first period off,
he wasn't going to play anyway. He's not really a penalty killer. So you kill the penalty for the rest of the period, and then you sit there when it's over and you say, you're back in the rotation.
Even if you want to talk to him in the locker room after the first period, and even if you want to call him out in front of the team, like whatever your method is, at that point, like you said, you have to put your ego aside, put this benching out the window, because you cannot go down to 16 forwards against a team like the New Jersey Devils.
Well, I'm going to give you a perfect example, by the way, because I have the perfect example already. So recently enough, Owen Tippett had an interesting, let's just say Owen Tippett in the second period against the Rangers, because I think it was on the third Ranger goal that something happens, right? Something like that. He had four shifts in the entire period. That was it. 4 shifts. And mind you, one of them, he took a shift that resulted in a goal that lasted 13 seconds, 7:28 mark to 7:41 of the second period. The next time he was on the ice was at 18:22 of the period.
Right.
Do you know the reason why? Because he was getting that treatment. The reason why is because by the time the second period was over, as the game progressed, Garnet Hathaway had been in 2 fights already. To the point, so he's spending 5 minutes at a time in the box.
Yep.
Nick Delorier's been involved in this type of stuff too. So you keep going down forwards. You're in a physical game with the Rangers. You're getting down forwards. So now he has to come back in. Now you got to throw your message out the window.
Sure.
About, look, I'm going to make an example of him because I don't have enough forwards to form a rotation.
Right.
And I think there was another part of the equation there because Noah Cates didn't really play much in that game either.
Right.
There was a handful of them. Oh, that was what it was. I'm sorry. So Hathaway had fought twice and got some decent amount of penalty minutes as a result. And that was the game where right before Cates got hurt with the foot, he took a puck off the face in the middle of the period. So he left for a long period of time and didn't come back until the third period.
Yeah, it's one of those.
You had no choice. You were down that many forwards. You have to play with you can't just sit there. At that point in time, what are you going to do? Literally roll 3 lines on the front end of a back-to-back.
Right. Against
the Rangers and then the Islanders.
Come on.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. But that's why I'm saying with Joel Farabee, it would have been it's fine to send your message as long as you have all forwards, as long as you have everybody else available. But the second that changed, you needed to kind of park it for that,
right. Especially like you said, and if your message is we're here to win hockey games,
that's the other part of it. Because you're not going to sit there and as it gets down to it, because that was they scored eventually on a power play late in regulation to tie the game. That wasn't the only power play they had in the game.
Right.
They ended up with, beyond the first period where the penalty actually occurs and Hathaway's kicked out of the game, I'm counting technically 3 power plays, if you will, because one of the penalties in the second period came with 8 seconds left. So it carried over to the third period. And then it was finally when you had those 2. And oh, by the way, that goal was scored with 1 second left on the second penalty that resulted in a 5-on-3.
Yep.
So you technically, maybe not at the beginning, because I don't think they pulled the goalie with 4:15 left in the game, but realistically got it to a point where it was, you had a 5-on-3, and then we're going to turn it into a 6-on-4 when the second penalty was called. Actually, really, at the beginning of that, probably a 6-on-3, because by that point, there was 250 left when the penalty was called.
Yeah.
So you had some time. You were going to turn it in maybe briefly. Either you were going to let it run out as a 5-on-3, jump immediately to 6-on-4.
Right.
But either way, you had other opportunities in the second period where Joel Farabee probably comes in handy on a power play. Just saying.
Absolutely.
And you didn't go there with it. And you didn't, and again, late in the game, yeah, you do find a way to tie it, but not, not without like,
Right.
with that guy on as your part of your power play. That's what I'm saying,
Right.
So you got to factor that in as well. But they come back, they get a point.
You
Good for
steal a
them, I
point.
guess. Like you got,
Yeah.
yeah, they pretty much stole it. That's for sure. I mean, like,
Right. Tyson Forrester came in and said, no, we're getting a point here.
So speaking of Tyson Forrester, by the way, want to get to Saturday?
Absolutely, I do. Yep.
I mean, he's part of the equation, by the way. And this is also what I meant, by the way, by another, like, sometimes I pick players for player of the game or player to watch. I should say player of the game, because that's a kind of a past tense thing. Player to watch leading into the game for the previews. And sometimes I do a pretty good, like, when especially like I use Jack Hughes for the Devils game. He had 3 points. That's probably a good,
easy.
Whatever. I hit on the pick again on Saturday because I picked Jake Gensel, who had 2 goals in the game. So yeah, you can figure that part out. Interesting game, right? Like,
hey, can you start picking guys on my fantasy team, please?
No, because I can't pick any on my own right now this year. Because won the whole thing last year. This year can't win a week practically. Like,
man,
it's just
I'm
been
having a tough time. Yeah. Andrei Vasilevsky getting pumped for 6 and getting pulled after the second.
Well, you guys do.
Brutal.
You're in a keeper league though.
Yep.
I'm not, and my goaltending is about as good as the Edmonton Oilers. I'll just say that much.
Connor Bedard looks great though.
I wish I don't have Connor Bedard.
I picked him up.
I'm sure you did. I wish. Missed out on that one. Anyway,
let's talk about Saturday night,
because interesting kind of game though, because like similar to the previous week, nothing for more than half a regulation. The first period was terrible. The first period was so bad.
Pretty not great.
The shots were 7-3 Flyers, and I don't even know if the 7 was like of quality. It was kind of like, you could have taken a nap during the first period and you didn't miss anything.
No, it was 2 teams feeling each other out, and it doesn't always make for the best hockey.
Exactly. And the second period at least picked up with the shots. Like, you finally started to see some more stuff, but it was turning into that kind of game. And then Pittsburgh got on the board first. Chris Letang, friendly fire, by the way, because that was off of Travis Sanheim.
Painful.
It's honestly, that's a rough look.
If he was doing it on purpose, it would have been gorgeous. It was he angled that blade perfectly.
He did.
Tipped it right to the top corner. Like, if he was doing it on purpose, it would have been stunning. But it turns out he wasn't.
No, but good response by the Flyers to follow with, because Owen Tippett scored shortly after, a little more than 2 minutes after.
Yep.
Nice backhand shot on a partial breakaway. I'll give him the full breakaway for it.
He
got a step
ahead.
He
got sprung.
Yeah. By the way, do you see who had the assist on that?
Tyson Forrester.
Forrester. Penguins got the lead back again early third period. Jake Gensel. Let's talk about. I want to talk about this second Flyer goal first before I get back to Forrester, because it's been a rough go for Scott Laughton. And for him to score a shorthanded goal to tie the game up, did that not look like the weight of the world off of a guy's shoulders when he celebrated that, just because of kind of how rough it's been?
And here's the thing. Scott Laughton has been around. Beating Gino to that puck had to feel good for him.
I'm sure it did.
You know that in today's day and age, a big part of the Flyers-Penguins rivalry runs through Evgeny Malkin.
Sure.
Huge part of that rivalry. Because I think most of the Flyers fan base, and even, the Flyers, respect Sid for who he is, and et cetera, and but Gino is that guy. He's the C-Red guy. He's the swing the stick at Michael Raffle guy. He's the take your ear cuffs off, you bleeping nerd. He's the guy.
But I just like that's the thing though. I like everything about that play for Laughton, because he does have to win the battle first, and then he slows it down and really makes the move. Jari's in position where he really probably could have made a save there. It goes off of the underside of his blocker arm and into the net.
Yep.
Look, you'll take those. Jari's actually been. I got to give credit where it's due, because I know, like, I'm really critical of him. I don't, and he's had some bad moments. There's no question about it. He has been really solid this year for the most part,
including scoring a goal this week.
Yeah, that was. I mean, So the funny part was, by the way, because I had this thought, not with Jari, but like I had this thought maybe about a week ago, because I'm watching, and as I was covering the game against the Rangers. I don't know when it's going to happen, but at some point in time, Igor Shesterkin's going to probably get one.
Absolutely.
Because he's a really good puck handler and he can clear it straight down the ice.
He
No
wants
problem.
one bad.
So I'm waiting for that moment.
He's wanted one bad for 2 or 3 years now.
It's coming at some point. If he gets the opportunity to shoot, he'll do it.
There's a couple guys in the league who are looking to fire.
But Jari's play on it was perfect. I mean, there's nothing else you can say about it. It goes in on him and he just takes the moment to get it up and over. And
low-key sneaky candidate, keep an eye on Alex Nedeljkovic.
Well, he scored one in the minors, hasn't he?
Yeah, and he's
going to Jari too, by the way. Jari had apparently scored one in the minors too.
I know, but Nedeljkovic is gonna be looking for it, and he's gonna be one of those names like Mike Smith. He may not be the best goalie in the league, but don't be surprised if he shows up as goal scorer.
Well, you also already know that both Bruins goalies can shoot it too. Olmark's already scored, and Swayman has looked a couple times.
Right.
So they both are candidates as well. Either way, but there you go. Like that was just off the underside of the blocker arm and ties the game up.
Last goalie goal before him. Do you remember?
Oh, before Jari?
Yep.
Hang on a minute here. Because it was recent. It was last year. Well, it was Ullmark.
Yep.
Because before Ullmark, I think before Ullmark was Pekka Rinne, right?
Pekka Rinne in like January of 2020.
Right before everybody's worlds as they knew it turned upside down. Because I remember watching that. That was one of the coolest things. Because Rinne's tried it multiple times, or had tried it. Because I know he's retired now. So
right, and we knew Rinne was kind of on his last legs, and we knew that might have been his last real shot at it. And
he went for it and good for it.
Yeah.
Do you know what's interesting though? And the last two in particular have been like this because Jari did it in the same situation as Ullmark did it a year ago.
Kind of just grab it and shoot. Like,
well, yes, but that's not the situation I'm referring to.
Okay.
When Rinne did it in the most traditional fashion that I can think of, which
gather
is
the puck behind the net and fire it from the goal line.
It's not even stylistically. It's the situation on the ice, which is usually you don't take the chance in a 1-goal game. You have a cushion.
Yeah.
And Ullmark and Jari both did the same thing. It's a 1-goal game. There's a chance that backfires on you.
If the guy in your zone knocks it down, you're out of the crease.
Right. Well, potentially. I think Jari was a little bit closer, but you're out of position. You're not set.
You're still in a shooting position.
Right. You're not set. You're not ready to defend or whatever.
At very minimum, you're scrambling back.
Right. So it's yes, exactly.
It's risky, but I think with time going on, and guys are just getting so much better at every position, and guys are just more athletic all over the place. You're gonna see more stuff. You're gonna see more stuff like this.
Guys try stuff at different and where I was getting with that too is guys practice different unique things all the time. Like you're not gonna tell me that that's not something that
you know what I really want. You ready?
What's that?
It's been enough time. Enough time has passed since he retired. Take away the trapezoid.
Well, I heard
give us goalies in the corners again. Come on. You're telling me you don't want to see all these goalies. You don't want to see what's his name? Stuart Skinner, Jack Campbell scrambling out to the corner. Come on.
No, I need a goalie who's actually really gonna do some traveling on this type of thing or whatever. I mean, Shesterkin probably would, honestly. Shesterkin's a mobile guy. He's a good skater. Like for a goalie, you got to give him that.
I could see Sorokin being the Islanders' best puck handler.
Sure. Well, and that's the thing, right? Aren't the best goalies at this type of thing the ones who can handle the puck like a third defenseman?
Sure.
Essentially, like we've talked about that a ton. Anyway, so back to the rest of this game. So the Flyers got a power play. But so by the way, that was a shorthanded goal for Lawton, by the way. Did we say that?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So shorthanded goal ties So shorthanded goal ties the game. Which to your point about the penalty kill, by the way, that has been a trend of this penalty kill is that they've scored a lot of shorthanded goals. And we're not talking about like cheapo shorthanded goals that come when the team is on a power play with an empty net.
Right.
We're talking about legitimate
And like
get odd man rushes or breakaways or something shorthanded.
I was gonna
like
say, and how many of them have been clean 2-on-0s?
The 2-on-0s I don't think were shorthanded. One of them was. One of them
at least one of them.
Yeah, no.
But either way, you're seeing the Flyers push up and get 3-on-2s, 2-on-1s, getting these really advantageous positions. And if they score, great. And they've scored off the rush several times. If they just set up in the zone and killed 20, 30 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
That's what you want out of your penalty kill, right? Like they can get in there, they can make a couple of passes, and then they can get the puck deep and get a full change. That's a huge boon for your penalty kill to provide providing that for you.
See, now you got me curious because I think I know what it was going in, but I want to check to see what it's up to now. Their penalty, see, this is where you kind of can't deny what they are after a certain point. This team's ranked 8th in the league in penalty kill.
Yeah, they are.
They're a good penalty killing team. They actually are,
with a lot of shorthanded goals. Like it's not just that they are preventing teams from doing their thing, like they are creating offense themselves, and like it is
because what you have to give credit impressive. Where you really have to give the credit to at this point, and I'm not talking individual wise. Yes, there is somebody you can give some of the credit to, by the way, because I do want to make sure, like we know who runs the power play, and we've been critical of that. You got to give Bradshaw a lot of credit for the penalty kill. He handles a lot of that, and these combinations are really good, and they know what they've got with certain guys who can kill penalties.
Hey, it turns out taking Ian LePerriere off the penalty kill is a great idea.
Do you want to know who else they've taken off the penalty kill, like personnel wise, though? Recently, I didn't even to be honest, you don't even realize it because they've still been this good. Like it's not like it's become a thing. He's taken Couturier off the penalty kill.
I did notice that a little bit
to try to preserve some minutes, and it's actually worked.
And frankly, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, because beyond Couturier, you've got Cam Atkinson who can kill penalties. Konechny's killing penalties. Lawton's killing penalties. Paling's killing penalties. Hathaway's typically been killing penalties.
Before he got hurt, Cates is killing penalties.
Yeah, Cates was killing penalties at times. Sure.
So I imagine Couturier might get a little time now that Cates is going to miss some time.
Well, Couturier or for a little while, he took Delorier off of it too because he had Delorier killing penalties. Yeah. I can tell you a handful of guys who it's not. Joel Farabee, we already mentioned in the show, is one. It won't be Bobby Brink. It probably won't be Morgan Frost.
Tyson
Forrester.
A ton of time.
I think Forrester's been out there on occasion, but they try to rotate somebody in who's new, and I guess would play alongside of a Lawton or something.
We're still figuring out what we got on the roster.
Although reality is, and this is where I'm talking about with combinations, Lawton and Konechny as a forward combination has been really good on the penalty.
Yeah, it has.
You just got to stick with some stuff.
We talk about generating offense. That pair has generated quite a lot on the penalty kill.
Sure. But one of the things I wanted to bring up when it came to this, because, sometimes, and even at this point in the season, like we just talked about a power play, like the Devils power play, that's still, we're over a quarter of the way through the season at this point. Still in the, high 30s, 36.8% on the power play.
Crazy.
That's crazy.
Crazy.
So sometimes there, on the other side of the equation, there's a team that's usually like maybe killing penalties at a higher rate than you would expect, right?
Right.
Like that you would think is, that penalty kill is as elite as it gets. It's miles above what the Flyers are, because the Flyers percentage is modest. It's 84.8%. Certainly not where it used to be, where it was in the mid 70s.
Yeah, it's gotten better.
Right. But it's not like you're not pushing 90 with that. But then you look at the teams that are in front of them, and there's only one team in the league that's even close, like even above 89%.
Okay.
So the margin's not big. Like they keep killing penalties at the rate they've killed penalties. They will even within a week or so, they would pass and go into 6th place. That's how close they are to 6th.
This is dangerously close to being considered an elite penalty killing unit.
In terms of being among the top 5 in the league, potentially. Yes, they're closing in on that possibility. I mean, they're top 10. Top 10 is usually a good categorizer for it.
If you get into the 5, 6, 7 range, I would argue with the offense you create that you have an argument for being one of those elite units.
Sure. By the way, so the Devils power play, really quick, because I went over the power play numbers, because I know we're going to bring that up in a second anyway for the Flyers side of things.
True.
So the Devils power play percentage has dropped by like a very small amount. It's an even 36% now, which, okay, no big deal. Remember what we were talking about with them killing off a 5-minute power play against this top ranked power play that the Devils have?
Yeah.
On the road, and this is after I think they played another road, and maybe not. I think they played at home the other night, so actually that's not the case. But on the road, their power play is 40.5%. And they look, did they get one out of it? Yes, they still, one of those goals that they have came against the Flyers.
That's crazy.
But you're talking about a 5-minute power play.
That's insane. The fact that they didn't score nuts. 3 on you is
right.
Is
the fact exactly. Now, meanwhile, on the other side of the equation, the Flyers' power play is still not very good. But in this particular,
you mean to tell me that 12.3% is bad, Kevin?
I don't have to tell you that part's bad. 28th in the league is bad.
Fair enough.
You're 28th in the league. Do you know what actually makes it even worse than that? To be honest, because I have a different, I have the whole league picture in front of me.
Yeah.
Which includes power play goals scored and power play opportunities.
Yeah.
They rank tied for 10th in the league in power play opportunities.
Wow.
So they've drawn a ton
of penalties. Wow.
The numbers of the teams around them, one of the other power plays that is not very good in the league or has had this level of opportunities and doesn't have much higher of a percentage is the Montreal Canadiens. Montreal is 24th in the league and has a 16.9 percentage.
Whew.
But they've had 89 power play opportunities. The Flyers are the next highest among the teams below that.
Right.
And the numbers around them, I'll just read them off rapid fire because there's only 7 anyway. So the numbers around them, 71, 75, 78, 73, 64, 70, and 60.
Oof.
So they have, there's a couple of teams on this list that they are close to 20 more power play opportunities than,
Right. And over the course of a season, not converting on those will cost you games, right? It's just one of those things that you have to be producing. If you are attempting to make the playoffs, if you are attempting to kind of do the thing, make the run, be that Cinderella team, the power play has got to be part of that.
Sure. Now, it is ironic, by the way, that the team that we are talking about them playing at the given moment actually is one of the teams that has a worse power play percentage than they do.
Yeah,
Pittsburgh's power play, and you actually let's this way, you could see it from the very first power play of the game because they got a power play less than 2 minutes into the game, and that period was winding down, and they were still getting outshot 6-1.
Yeah,
they didn't generate anything on that, and it is it a little confusing? Sure, it is, because that's a power play that what you're by this point what you're gonna get.
Absolutely.
It's Crosby, it's Malkin, it's Gensel, it's probably Letang or Carlson, one of the two. Brian Rust is probably the 5th guy. But you expect that unit to be able to score a little bit. And hell, not only did they not score at any point during the game with a power play, they gave up a shorthanded goal.
Right.
And they lost the special team battle. So back to the Flyers power
play.
Right.
And I was going to say the Flyers did score 2 power play goals in this game.
No, just one.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. I'm sorry.
It was 2 special teams goals in the third period.
You're
which is
right.
a big deal. But
it was 2 power play goals against the Devils. That's what it was.
But this was my point. This was precisely my point with the power play.
You got 3 goals in your last 2 games.
Well, not only that, but I'm looking at in particular. I'm looking at the goal that they scored in this game against Pittsburgh. That is the style of which, if they could score more goals like that on a power play, please, because you're talking about Tyson Forster and the shot that we've been waiting to see. I mean, he scored 3 goals on the season coming into that before that goal, and all 3 of them were not really his type of shot. You had the 2 that were deflections, obviously, and then you had the one that was right at the front of the net where he puts it was a carom off the end boards.
Right.
So he's just putting it back on goal. He's not ripping it. This was grip and rip and go top shelf.
Yep. And it was an absolute
I saw that
beauty.
I saw that thing sail to the top of the net, and I went, "Ooh, okay, there it is."
Yeah. And then that was pretty. And then shortly after that, Jake Gensel, or the Penguins pull the goalie, get the empty net. Jake Gensel scores with 21 seconds to go.
They just couldn't clear the zone enough down the stretch. I mean, they were trying to, obviously, and it was just, It was what it was.
Too much pressure from the Penguins.
Sure. Now now here's the thing. So they go to overtime. The Penguins dominated the overtime.
Yep.
For the most part.
The great thing is it's only 5 minutes.
And even got a penalty at the end because they were caught and Farabee jumped the bench while Lawton was trying to get to the bench too quickly.
Yep. Lawton fell awkwardly into the boards.
Right. Got stuck, got caught.
Tried to get back to the bench, was laboring a little bit, getting back to the bench. Farabee cheated, jumping out there. You get called for too many men. Sure. It's unfortunate, but thankfully you hold the fort. You get outshot 6-1 in overtime.
Sure, and there was a couple, and they had a couple of chances on that on the power play while there was a minute left. I mean, they didn't, not a ton. It was only a minute, but
sure. But again, that 4-on-3 that I was talking about, it's dangerous.
I guess unless you have the 28th and the 30th ranked power plays going against each other, right? Like,
right, and especially with a good Flyers penalty killing unit out there.
Sure.
They kill that last minute.
But it's still, you can have a good penalty kill unit. It's different when it's 3 guys out there. That's the
absolutely.
So how about to the shootout part, huh?
Yeah. Goalies
so they're good at shootouts now.
Apparently, goalies played well. Sean Couturier pulled the same little fake backwards move. He pulled it a couple of weeks ago. He pulled it Thursday night in against New Jersey. He pulls it out again here. This time it is successful. It is the only goal in the shootout, and the Philadelphia Flyers win.
I mean, by the way, that was almost a carbon copy of the penalty shot against Vancouver.
Yeah, it was pretty much identical.
I don't think he took as wide of a turn, but he came in, did the same move, and put it off the post and in, just like he did against Vancouver.
Sean, you're 2 for 3 with that move. They're going to start stopping it. Move on.
Well, here's the thing. I actually think it was a well-calculated decision on his part.
Because he had just done it the night prior?
No.
The game prior?
No, well, because it didn't happen the game prior. It was the last shootout, you mean?
Well, that was Thursday against the...
No, that was a week earlier. It was against the Islanders.
Oh, you're right.
No, the other one was overtime. They didn't even get so much...
No, you're right. I'm sorry.
But I think it was a calculated decision potentially, because if you can get Jari moving a little bit, laterally like that, and kind of have to, he didn't go in. Well, he didn't, and he didn't go in on him looking for, let me open him up or let me do something like, like that, where he's trying to get the goalie to necessarily make the first move. He's just trying to get him moving a little bit by going across the crease like that. And it's a unique way to change the angle a little bit and kind of, if you can, I'm not saying that the goalie is definitely getting mesmerized by this, but if you can get him a little caught up in your own movement, like your body movement.
Yeah, even if you just get him a little bit flat-footed, that's all you need.
Right. And and in general, though, I think that there's something to be said about going, trying to go either below the glove hand or below the blocker hand on him, kind of going in between the pad and the glove hand or the blocker hand, that there's room to do something with. So I actually think that, like, our goalie's going to figure it out. Sure, they are, and I think
you can't go back to that too many times. That was
I think the good example is when he tried it against Sorokin, and it's like, well, Sorokin's a really good goalie. He's probably stay with. I'm not saying that, like I said, Jari's had a really good start to the year, but I do think that there might be something calculated there where it's like, listen. Because I look at it this way. By now, Sean Couturier's faced Tristan Jarry on a breakaway, I'm sure, at some point. And kind of where you can go with that or whatnot. So,
or at least what it's going to look like when he's coming down on you.
Right. Or let's put it this way. You can do, like, in general, you can do film on that type of stuff and go back and see what a guy's tendencies are, or somebody's going to know something, or somebody who's sitting there with you might sit there and go, hey, you know what? Go under the blocker.
Right.
Or something like that. Or we'll tell you something. Right. How about at the other end of the ice, though? Because Sam Harrison's been in 2 of these now, and he's, he hadn't let anything in.
He looks great. He
hasn't let anything in yet.
I think it's 7 for 7 in the shootout so far this year. And
correct.
You love to see that. You really do. And that kind of capped off what ended up being a bit of a gutsy performance out of the Flyers.
Sure. So Gensel went upstairs and missed the net on that, but the other he made 2 saves. He made 2
full-blown saves.
Well, the glove save on Crosby, who's as good as anybody in these things, shows you the composure that he has. He's calm and cool about these things. And then I like what he did on the Rust attempt too, because Brian Rust tried to get him to bite first and he didn't, and he stayed with it and waited it out and made the save, and they won the game again. And I know what you want to get to. You want to get to the post-game line.
Because John Tortorella is doing John Tortorella things.
With the microphone in front of him.
We said when he got hired about how exciting this was, because when we were going to get quotes like we got on Saturday night. I'm just gonna hit.
Do you want to read it verbatim?
Here. I'm gonna hit the whole quote here.
What do you want? Are you gonna hit the question that led into it?
You can hit the question.
Yeah, okay, hold on. I gotta dig that up for a second. Hold on, because I don't. I'm just generalizing it because I don't have
Go for it.
We don't get, the transcripts are usually sent out by the home team, so I don't have that from this game. But the question was along the lines of something about staying with your game or whatever it was, and is that part of the reason why you won or whatever? And John Tortorella's answer was,
John Tortorella comes in with an absolute classic. We win the game because we've got balls. We do stupid stuff. We don't make plays sometimes, lose sight of certain momentums in the game, a number of things we have to work on to try to get consistent at. But one thing we do have is balls. And you know what? If you told me his name was John Balls Tortorella, I would completely believe you. The team should call him nothing but that for the rest of the year. Hey, Balls, what's up? 100% that should be his nickname for the rest of the year.
So over the course of the week, he had three I won't say three quotable moments, but he had an exchange earlier in the week that
he's warming up. John Tortorella is getting into midseason form too.
He is warming up, but he had an exchange earlier in the week that I thought was a little bit awkward, honestly, because it had to do with the power play and Cam York being used on the power play or whatever. And there was this long thing about how eventually, about utilizing Cam York on a power play or whatever. And it turned into this conversation about how he sees York's calling card as being more on the defensive side. That's what's going to make him a successful defenseman in the NHL. So when countered with, he's been known as an offensive defenseman though, right? He's coming out of his draft year. He was mobile, then all the other stuff or whatever. His counter to that was, who's labeled him an offensive defenseman or who's given him that label or whatever. And you can practically see, first of all, it tells you that he's never watched or talked to anybody about the past of a player beyond what he sees right now, because anybody could tell him he played that position in college. He played that position for the U.S. national team. They won a World Junior Championship gold medal because of him playing at that like that. Yep. Right. So it's kind of followed him around. And the second that it was brought up that the scouting community had said that, where you can literally see his skin crawl over somebody else who's not me said he's more of an offensive guy. And I'm going to tell you, no, he's not. Right. And that, I just thought that was awkward because to me, you want to know anything about by the way, who's given him that label? How about you go talk to your assistant general manager who was part of the previous regime, who's still here, who was part of the regime that drafted him.
Right.
Who literally on the same weekend came out and said, oh, he's a mobile. They did say he can be two-way, and that's fine. He can be a two-way defenseman. I'm not saying he can't, but he's been qualified as a mobile defenseman his entire development.
Sure.
You're not going to try to convert him into a stay-at-home guy and say that's his calling card. No. He's in between. He's a hybrid.
Sure.
But I just found that awkward though, that you've got somebody within the whole organization, within the front office, who literally drafted him, who would have heard from scouts that he's got that in his game.
You know who that scouting report sounds a lot like, by the way?
Who's that?
Travis Sanheim.
Sure, a little bit.
That's how people were talking about him when he was 21, 22. So,
sure.
And we've seen what he's blossomed into, because he's still.
So I do want to the other good quotable moment. And I do want to pull this up. Because this one I can read more verbatim because I didn't. But I want to pull up what Tortorella had to say, kind of more so following not the immediate of the Hathaway Luke Hughes thing, but kind of the follow, because this was a really good answer.
Yeah, John Tortorella had a good week.
So, because he got asked about kind of where this is kind of a state of the game kind of thing or whatever, and Tortorella basically said, started off and said, "I'm glad the kid isn't hurt. Really good player, young man in this league." But that's a problem in our league right now. Our players in this league do not put enough emphasis on making sure you're protecting yourself from hits like that, making sure you absorb hits like that. We've kind of tried to turn this league into a no-hit league. Now people aren't ready to be hit. I think it's a lost art in how you take hits. I do think, looking at the clip, I think he thinks it's icing. A mistake was made. We've got good refs. We've got good linesmen. A mistake was made last night, and what bothers me is we had to suffer for that mistake, losing a player. But I believe the league, it's a no-go. There's nothing wrong with the play. It shouldn't even have been a penalty. It screams to the athletes in our game, be prepared to be hit, because big hits are allowed. Nowadays, I'm not so sure, because everyone puts their arms up when there's a big hit. It makes me sick what goes on in the league here on big hits. That's part of our game. I'm not trying to run down the league. I just think we've taken away the policing of the game from the players. With all the new rules, we've taken away the policing of the game. It should belong to the players. It comes into how the game, it's a fast game, which is fantastic. The skill in the game is fantastic. I think some of the rule changes we've made have improved the game. But I just don't think we should take the foundation of the National Hockey League out. Hits are allowed. Back in the day, and I'm not trying to go way back, but you've got to learn how to take a hit. That's a big play in winning games, is taking a hit to make a play and being braced to take these hits. And if you do have to have a big hit, you shouldn't have to fight someone 2 seconds later because it's a big hit. That's what I don't get. Not blaming anybody. I just don't like where that part of the game is going. That's a foundation of the National Hockey League. It's a man's game. We've got it convoluted a little bit. And the thing is that, like, I thought that multiple times, by the way, because the Ranger game a couple of weeks ago was a perfect example of this, because Hathaway and Delorier were getting into it with Trouba over nothing, like big hit. Deal with it.
That's what Jacob Trouba does.
Right. And then later in the game, Will Cooley had to fight, or jumped in and fought Hathaway over another legitimately clean hit.
Yep.
And that was sitting in the press box. That was my immediate response was, that's ridiculous. It's a clean hit. Here we go again. We're just going to, every time it happens, somebody's got to jump somebody.
And it goes beyond that even. Like the first thing I did when we were talking about Hathaway getting kicked out of this game earlier was I looked up when the next game is. It's December 19th. Who is Garnet Hathaway fighting in the first period of that game as an answer the bell? And I'm not saying it should be that way, because it was a clean hit. And again, Luke Hughes is not injured, which I think we are both grateful for. But he will still, and Garnet Hathaway willingly will, because he's just that kind of guy. But Garnet Hathaway is going to have to answer the bell for a hit that shouldn't have been penalized, was
probably
clean. It's just frustrating. Like,
probably. And look, there's actually an element where I can understand that a little bit, because that'll be premeditated. That'll be a little bit like,
that almost makes it worse.
But I guess, but
because you've had 3 weeks to see that it was clean, and to see that the whistle hadn't blown, and just like.
But I think and this is to Tortorella's point. I think that the two things that he's talking about the most are, first of all, it's the immediate response. If you don't like something that happens in a game and you carry a little bit of a grudge and you take it to the next game, so be it.
Right.
That's what makes ririvalries.
All right, I'm hoping we get a little bit of that just from Saturday to Monday, because
listen,
home and home with a division rival.
Well, hey, listen, you go back to the part where it's the Devils, and you already made note of when that next meeting is.
Yep.
You play these guys outside on national television later in the season. Don't you want there to be regardless?
You want a little heat there,
right? But regardless of where the two teams are, whenever that finally when February finally rolls around, because there's a lot of games in between. Regardless of where they are in the standings at that point, don't you want there to be a little bit of an animosity there that you can kind of hang your hat on going into that game?
Some storyline to draw on. Absolutely. You want a little bit of heat, maybe a little bit of violence.
So to me, I think the 2 points that he's talking about the most are the immediate response in terms of, and it happens everywhere. The guy takes a big hit and immediately he's got to fight somebody. And there's been talks about the idea. There's been talks about the idea that was going to eventually result in an instigation penalty.
Right. I was going to say,
Try
I
to
thought
cut
the
down
whole
on that.
conversation, I thought the whole conversation around the instigator was when you jump a guy for a clean hit, you get the instigator.
Well, they haven't enforced it. They haven't enforced it enough yet that it doesn't
Right.
stop. That's the problem.
So
but
is this another issue in the NHL that kind of just goes all the way up, and this is going to be a problem for as long as Gary Bettman is in charge?
I don't know about that. Because I think that there's part of what Tortorella is saying is true in the sense that guys play. I don't know if it's that they play, like, I don't want to say they play loosely. It's just that I agree. I think guys aren't preparing themselves for the possibility that someone's going to just come across the middle of the ice and
I don't disagree
and go in for a big hit. Like, and I think that, and it's tough to say, like, it's tough for me to say that
there will be a correction on that, right? Because as the league gets it, I'm going to use the word overzealously here, but as the league gets softer around the edges and isn't as prepared for the big hits and the physical contact in the open ice, then the guys like Trouba and other guys who can lay big physical clean hits that they don't get suspended for,
right,
that they don't get penalized for, those guys will see increased value.
Sure, I don't see why not. Well, and that's
right.
And that's the thing though too, like,
the league got a little bit faster after that 04-05 lockout, and then Chris Pronger just ate the entire league alive.
Sure.
Right? Like
until he couldn't anymore. Sure.
Of course, but he found a way to play within the rules and still be physical and implement his will. And Jacob Trouba is very much a modern day version of that.
Sure. Well, and that's the thing. Like I know Trouba hits hard, and you don't want to get lined up on the train tracks with Trouba at all. I get that.
Well, then keep your head up and don't be on the train track.
That's exactly it. It's like I see so many of the hits that Trouba makes, and I genuinely come away from watching so many of them, and I don't have a problem with them.
No, he is remarkably clean. For the most part.
The only thing that comes close, and I think that this is factored in a little bit, but sometimes, like, Trouba's a towering figure. And if you hit a smaller player, it's going to, his shoulder is going to be head height for certain guys.
But I will say he does a remarkable job of keeping his trajectory downward.
He does go downward, and
he doesn't drive up through guys.
Well, and every player in the league, no matter who you are, you're losing a little bit of height when you put your head down.
Sure.
So you know, and things like that. We've discussed stuff like this through and through, and it's, it is what it is. But I thought was actually a very, like, I didn't disagree with anything in that in terms of what he had to say about that. For as awkward as I thought the other thing was, the Cam York thing was,
right,
this was fine. And then obviously we got the gem of the week when he talked about how they won the game against Pittsburgh.
Absolutely. And he's not wrong about that, right? Like, talking about this Pittsburgh game, breaking down the quote a little bit, like, he's not wrong. This was a ballsy win that this team could have easily crumbled on Saturday night, like they kind of did in overtime on Thursday, right? Like, you expend all your energy to make the comeback, you get to overtime, the balloon kind of deflates a little bit.
I think the equation where you're really going with that too is you had a lead this time too, and you gave up the tying goal, and you could have let that just be it.
With 21 seconds left on the road, right? The building gets fired up. You head into overtime with a rocking building. You shut it down for 4 minutes, take a stupid penalty, shut it down for the 5th minute, and then win a shootout. And that is the kind of thing that if the Flyers do make the playoffs, that's a big 2 points in Pittsburgh.
Sure. Now, I'm not willing to go that far.
Of course, obviously. I'm just saying, if you do remain in this conversation,
you know what's funny? And look, because we're doing this on Sunday night. This holds a little bit less weight now than it did on Tuesday when I said it on the air on 97.3.
Okay.
But because basically, and this was one of the first times I've been on air this was pretty much the first time I've been on air. I've done a couple things for the station, like we talked about digitally, but not on the airwaves.
Right.
So this is one of my first times. This is pretty much my first time on the air, and I basically got to ask the question: how are they doing this? And like, how do they have the record they had? Because they don't have a superstar, they don't have this, they don't have that. So how is this happening? And I brought up the concept of how a lot of their wins have been lunch pail style, where you just go to work. Their work ethic is on display pretty much every night, even in the games that they've lost this week, no less. I mean, like, you put in the work to get the comeback effort close against New Jersey. You put in the even for an ugly game like the Carolina game was, you're in that game until there's 4 minutes left and you give up one more. You're in it.
Yeah.
The thing was, though, and I compared it to, I said, one of the things I compared it to was kind of the way, like, the Philadelphia Eagles, who now are 10-2, but we're 10-1 during the course of the week. And I said, they've had a lot of games, though, where you're coming away from it going, I don't know how. It was frustrating. It wasn't very fundamental. They didn't do this right. They made this mistake, but they won. And sometimes you're just going to have games where there's no rhyme or reason to the actual result.
You just find a way to get a W.
You just find a way, straight up. And that's, or at least you come away with it where it's like, listen, the will of the team is greater than all of those other things put together. The mistakes, the inconsistencies, the improvement areas that you need to work on, all of the things that maybe that will frustrate you to no end, like Tortorella seemed to express with this game. It's like, well, we couldn't do this right. We didn't do this. We have this to improve on. We make stupid mistakes, but guess what? We won the game. So we
gutted it out.
Yeah. So you know what that means? You know how we win this game? We win this game because we've got balls. That's what it is. And that's a fair enough explanation. And that's why I kind of said, like now think about it. This team's 12-10-2.
Yeah.
And you're 24 games into the season. And
that's real.
Not only is it real, and like, listen, do you know what the interesting part is? And again, this is not going to please a lot of people because at the moment that doesn't put you in a playoff spot technically.
Well, no, right. And you are tied for it. You're out on games in hand, etc. Whatever. Not super critically important right now, but the fact that you are still hanging out around the playoff range.
Right. And here's what is important. You were under a minute, so you were basically 50 seconds away from nothing against New Jersey. You were 50 seconds away from that. And even though you gave up the tying goal against Pittsburgh, that could turn into a bunch of different things. Let's put it this way. You were trailing in that early third period. You're down 2-1.
You could have lost that game.
That could be it. And you could get nothing out of it that way. You could have done what you did, give up the tying goal and then lose it. And so you don't get a point there. Like this week, they got 3 points out of 6. They could have easily gotten nothing.
Correct. And that is the kind of thing that, like, I know I keep saying if they make the playoffs, this is the kind of thing that keeps you in the conversation, that keeps
the thing that keeps them in the conversation also is like, and this is the thing that kind of, it still blows my mind. And it's why I'm not like, I will not go to the playoff conversation for a lot of reasons because
fair. That's totally fair.
Well, because in general, I mean, like, let's put it this way. This team is, I like to play the 4-point game a little bit is the way I look at it because 4 points I think is very modest. I think it's very easy to make up. Like there's a variety of ways you can make it up. It can be games in hand. It can be just regular results. Like I don't think games in hand actually matter to 4 points in the standings much as other numbers do. If the Flyers had 4 more points in the standings, they'd be 8th in the league.
Yep.
And if the Flyers had 4 fewer, and we talked about how close they were to going from 3 to none on this entire week.
Yep.
If they had 4 fewer, they would be in a tie with teams ranked 23rd, 24th, and 25th.
So 8th from the bottom, basically.
With 3 more at 20, hot on your heels. And oh, by the way, suddenly a team like the Edmonton Oilers, who are at 19 and still ranked 29th in the league. Like,
yeah, right. Which, I mean, here's the thing, though. The longer they stay there, at a certain point, that's kind of just what they are this year. I don't know.
Oh, I know. I'm getting at. What I'm getting
at. Keep sitting here saying, "Well, they'll snap out of it," and I don't know.
No. What I'm getting at is all I'm trying to get at is the simplicity because they've had 2 different things happen over the course of the last couple of weeks. They've had a 5-game winning streak, and then before the game against Pittsburgh, they lost 4 out of 5. And to their credit, they won a game in the middle. And they lost in one of them in overtime, which gets you something. But otherwise, again, 50 seconds, and that's just a typical 4 out of 5. You lost them,
right?
And and you went from 5 games with 10 total points, the maximum, to 5 more games with 2. And that's all I'm talking about is
Absolutely.
This team from a work ethic standpoint is good enough to go on a 5-game winning streak against legitimate good teams. And they're also not good enough that they could just as easily lose 5 in a row and find themselves in the top 10 of the draft lottery.
Sure.
Because that's how it goes.
And as we sit here on Sunday evening, looking ahead at the schedule between now and our next show, which do you think is more likely? Because as it sits right now, the Flyers will play Pittsburgh in Philadelphia on Monday night. You will also play in Arizona and in Colorado. You kind of start that Central West road trip.
The in Arizona game, by the way, is always a good time, right? When you got to watch a game when there's only 5,000 people in the place.
Listen,
I think it's got a little charm to it, but for an NHL game, it's a little rough.
Because, so I don't watch a ton of games at Mullet Arena. I'll be honest.
You don't watch the ones that are on. Yeah, I got
you. Because it is just the Flyers' second time there. I think it still has the uniqueness factor.
It helps when you only go there once a year.
Exactly. If I was a division rival and we had already been there twice and we're coming back one more time, I'd be
if you're the Colorado Avalanche playing the Arizona Coyotes, this has no charm.
Right. But
I get you.
Regardless, Monday Pittsburgh, Thursday in Arizona, Saturday in Colorado.
Yes.
So Colorado's a probable loss. Arizona's a probable win. Just kind of generally tossing that out there.
Well, I don't know about that. So here's the thing. I think they've got a better shot of beating Pittsburgh again than they do against Arizona.
That's fair.
Because Arizona's been scrappy. They're an interesting for a team that plays in the arena that they do. Let's be real.
Right.
That roster has found a way. They've actually found a way. They found a way to win more than lose. Not only are they they're above hockey 500, but they're legitimately above 500. They've played 23 games and they've got 12 wins and 11 losses, which for a team that probably doesn't carry a ton of expectations.
Right.
Newsflash. They're in a playoff spot.
I was going to say, and in a wide open West, we talked a little bit on last week's show about the kind of the haves and mids in the West, and you have your 6 kind of locked in playoff teams, but that wild card race is wide open. And as we sit here today, Arizona is sitting in that first spot.
I know. And I know we talked about how good the penalty kill has been this year. That's a team that I would not want to take too many penalties against.
No.
I'll say it that way. I don't think Arizona, I'm looking at the power play rankings right now. Arizona's got the 6th ranked power play, by the way.
Yeah.
So that qualifies them as a good one anyway. But I just think about the guys who I know are going to be on that power play unit. And I'm talking the likes of Logan Cooley's going to be on it. Clayton Keller's going to be on it. They've done different things. Obviously they've got other younger guys. Don't get me wrong. But they've got some vets that are
they're
chipping in a good way.
They're
in a really good way.
They're starting to approach being a real hockey team in Arizona. And this is kind of the first year that they've started to put some pieces together and really put an actual hockey team together. And it's interesting to see what that looks like. I do think it will be a good week. I think this is a good, and we kind of say this on every show, but this is a good little tester week, right? Because Pittsburgh is a team that you got to be beaten if you want to be for real.
And you're playing them again too. That's another factor. Right. Is when you play Pittsburgh again right away too. So there's already a kind of there's a familiarity there from just the previous game alone. For one, and then on top of that, they're not going to take lightly to the fact that you won the game on the road against them 2 days earlier.
They're gonna come in and try to take that win back on your home ice for sure.
There's something to be said about the travel aspect of going into Thursday, by the way, because that's no short trip going all the way out to Arizona like that. That's not really.
Do you know when they're going to go out? Is it going to be Tuesday?
Probably Wednesday.
Wednesday. Okay.
Well, because what I would imagine is that, and I don't know if they'll do it this way or not. They'll probably will though, with 2 days in between games. They'll probably play Monday, take Tuesday off, Wednesday practice, and then leave.
Practice and then travel. Okay.
Yeah, and then Thursday would be the.
I almost just didn't wonder if it would make more sense to just travel on Tuesday to give them a full Wednesday, in Arizona just to normalize. I don't know.
Right. Now I'm trying to look because I wanted to see because I don't think Arizona plays. Arizona plays on Monday night also and then doesn't play again for the next couple days either. And Arizona's already and Arizona's already going to be home.
Yeah, so they're going to be nice and well rested. And
sure. Now, I do want to throw an interesting thing onto the Colorado game, because Colorado is now they're actively playing a game as we speak, but Cale Makar is not.
Oh,
and dealing with a lower body issue that is now keeping him out of the lineup. And all Jared Bednar would say is he's out tonight. I don't know we'll see about later. And you're now 6 days away from that game.
Well, it seems pretty likely at this point that even if he does play, it sounds like he may not be 100%. So.
Well, he had a couple, he had a really close call way back earlier in the year where he kind of got jammed up against the boards and looked like he looked like his knee was shot right there.
Yeah,
I mean, it could have been.
That was
the fact that he's even played every game is already significant enough as it is. But that's a piece of the puzzle, obviously, when McKinnon can't play. When Makar can't play, but McKinnon's they're already. I mean, they're already down Landeskog. Landeskog isn't able to play, which is I know I feel the same way about it.
Such a shame. But he's just pulling a full Ryan Ellis.
No, but at least there's a clear-cut reason behind it.
I know. But regardless, it seems like it's going to be a week that there is some room for opportunity, right? This could be a week where the Flyers pick up 6 points. It could also be a week where the Flyers pick up 2 points and they're both from overtime losses. So
potentially, yeah.
This is one of those weeks, and I know I said it last week too, but this is one of those weeks where if you win all 3 games, you keep that playoff talk alive. If you lose all 3 games, we start the trip down the standings, and either one is honestly about as equally likely at this point.
If they win all 3 games this week, then they're probably hot on the heels of Carolina at that point.
That's what I'm saying.
Or second in the division.
And now
if they lose all 3, well, first of all, if they lose the first one in and of itself could straight up change the standing position right off the bat. Yeah. And I don't think New Jersey is as bad as where they are in the standings right now, especially as they recover because they're missing all these guys.
Healthy. Yeah.
Right. So that's another thing to completely to watch out for, obviously.
I agree, but you can still come out here and bank some big points this week.
Sure. Well, let's do this way. You're gonna obviously remain in front of Pittsburgh if you win,
of course,
regardless of whether that's in overtime or not. So you know what? You might as well see where that goes first. The interesting part will be, and I don't there's not a lot of games on the 2 days that they don't play, but that's the opportunity when that happens exists for other teams to gain points when you don't.
Sure.
And then they play Thursday. I think the Arizona game is going to be kind of sneaky tricky because that's a sneaky good team.
That's fair. And
then
going into an enemy building, you always kind of have that opportunity, especially when they've had a couple days to rest.
And let's put this way, Colorado, despite it all, by the way, is still 5th in the league.
Yeah, they're still
that's still a really good team. And for what it's worth, they're tied 1-1 through 2 periods as we finish the show up here but they're playing LA. And LA's top
it's a really good team.
That's a potential future playoff matchup.
Oh, man, I would love to see that.
That would be fun. So, but there you go. So.
Yeah, and that is a pretty good place to put a bow on today's show. If you've noticed anything fun about our show number here watching on the YouTube channel, it is episode 199. We got 200 next week. I don't think we're doing anything crazy special for it, but hey, it's episode 200, and we've been doing this for a really long time. So, here's what we do. Go on Twitter or X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. Let us know what your favorite moment in the show's history was. Okay. Favorite show, favorite episode, favorite conversation, favorite bit, favorite bracket from the pandemic days, whatever.
Maybe we'll reminisce a little bit next week.
We might do a little something, but send us your favorite moments at YWT Podcast. Make sure to tag Kevin in them at Kevin _Durso. You can find us and also him on pretty much all your socials. Make sure to follow Kevin over on Instagram too. That post-game work is excellent over there. You find the podcast anywhere you find your podcast, including where you're listening to it right now. Also check us out on YouTube. In the meantime, and also sportstalkphilly.com. In the meantime, I think that's going to do it for today. We will be back next week. We got a couple of good fun games. The Flyers will be kind of out west. We get a little bit of Flyers after dark this week. That's always fun.
Yeah, kind of.
And we'll be back next week. So until then, see ya.